Hello and welcome to part 3 in a series of videos that I'm putting out this week, breaking down all the fights taking place this weekend at UFC on ESPN +3 from a betting perspective. I've already covered 6 fights on this card. I will link to the breakdowns for those fights in the description below, and in today's video I'll be covering another 4 fights. Now, if every video that I put out this week gets 30 likes, I'll be doing a bonus video this Saturday where I'll be scanning through each of the fights taking place this weekend to try and find a decent value prop bet on every matchup. So prop bets are basically these types of bets where you can bet on highly specific things. For example, if we look at the main event, you could bet on Thiago Santos to win in round 3. That's a prop bet. So if I get 30 likes on this video and 30 likes on every other video that I do this week, I will be putting that out a few hours before the event on Saturday. So let's jump right into this card. The first fight that I want to cover today is Gillian Robertson against Veronica Macedo. Now, Veronica Macedo has had a really tough start to the UFC. I'm not sure if she still holds this record, but when she made her debut way back in 2016, she was the youngest fighter to ever compete in the UFC at just 20 years old. Now, with Veronica Macedo, I feel that she hasn't had much luck since signing for the UFC. She's lost her first 2 fights, but the 2 fights that she's had so far weren't under very favourable conditions. So if we take a look at her, she's quite small at 5'4", which, to be honest with you, is quite small for a flyweight. But when she made her debut back in 2016, I don't believe the flyweight division existed back then. In fact, I'm sure the flyweight division didn't exist back then, and I'm not even sure if the strawweight division was around then. So she was forced to make her debut in the bantamweight division against a very physically imposing, strong, powerful opponent in Ashley Evans-Smith. Now, Ashley Evans-Smith is a big girl. Don't mean that disrespectfully. She is a beautiful girl, but at the same time, she's very physical, very strong, and significantly bigger than Veronica Macedo. If we bring up Ashley Evans-Smith's stats here, she's 5'8", so she would have absolutely towered over Macedo. And if you go back and watch that fight, in terms of skills, they were pretty well matched. Skill for skill, Macedo held her own in both the striking and grappling exchanges, but the physical advantages for Evans-Smith were just too much for Macedo to overcome. Macedo was struggling to back Evans-Smith up because Evans-Smith had such a big size advantage. She was able to walk through Macedo's shots, and also on the ground, size can be a huge factor in grappling exchanges, and it made it very difficult for Macedo to control Evans-Smith and get up from bottom position just because of how much bigger Evans-Smith was. Then, in her last fight, back in May against Andrea Lee, a similar story. Even though Andrea Lee is a flyweight, Macedo is also a flyweight. Andrea Lee, just a very physically imposing fighter, strong and powerful. We saw that actually in her fight last weekend against Ashley Evans-Smith. 2 very physically powerful women, and again, Andrea Lee at 5'6" had a decent sized size advantage over Veronica Macedo. It's only 2 inches, but when they were in the octagon, you could just see there was a completely different level of physicality. Andrea Lee was able to throw Macedo around. Now, really speaking, for this sort of wingspan and body type, Macedo should be fighting in the strawweight division. I'm not sure why she isn't fighting in the strawweight division, but irrespective of that, the good news is that in this matchup, her 3rd fight in the UFC, she will be taking on Gillian Robertson, who is actually smaller than her at 5'2". So this will be the first time we've seen Macedo go up against someone that will be of a similar size to her. And I am excited to see how she does, to be honest with you, because she more than held her own against Andrea Lee and Ashley Evans-Smith. Those fights were really competitive. There were a lot of momentum swings, and I was really impressed with her. So I do believe physicality was the main reason why she lost her first 2 fights. But in this matchup against Gillian Robertson, at the moment, you can see, if we check out her odds, she's currently an underdog at around about, her odds have slightly declined a little this morning, but average odds are around 2.40 at the moment, which gives her an implied probability of rounded up to 42%. Now, if this fight stays standing, which I'm not convinced it will because both girls do like to go to the ground, I give Veronica Macedo an enormous advantage standing. She is a significantly better striker than Gillian Robertson. Really technical striking. Very, very good striking indeed. Gillian Robertson has really bad striking defense, not very good offensively at all, and doesn't really have any power in her hands. Now, on the ground, this fight is much closer. Gillian Robertson will do everything she can to get this fight to the ground. Robertson's one of those girls that will literally commit everything she has to every takedown. But Veronica Macedo's takedown defense was decent against bigger opponents like Andrea Lee and Ashley Evans-Smith, but ultimately the physical advantages they had meant that they were able to get her down. But Gillian Robertson at 5'2", a similar size to Macedo, I think she's going to have a much more difficult time getting Macedo to the ground. Now, Macedo has pretty good takedown defense, but she's very, very aggressive. So one of the mistakes that she makes is when her opponent is trying to take her down, as soon as she gets comfortable and feels like she's doing a good job of stuffing that takedown, she may start to strike them, which then opens her up to a different takedown that her opponent transitions into. So that's one weakness Macedo has got. But at the same time, you know, she's only 23 years old. She's going to be making massive improvements from fight to fight. And every time we see her, I'd expect to see a different version of her. So, you know, that was a mistake that she was making a lot in the Ashley Evans-Smith fight. And she wasn't making it so much against Andrea Lee. So it's clear that she is working on her holes and trying to make improvements. So if this fight does go to the ground, Gillian Robertson is very good. She does have a heavy top game. She's got sneaky submissions, but she isn't bulletproof. If we take a look at her record, she was submitted in her last fight against Mayra Bueno Silva. She was also dominated on the ground by Barb Honchak. So, you know, she's not a total phenom on the ground, and Macedo is very technical and is very dangerous. Macedo, like I said, held her own on the ground against much bigger opponents in Andrea Lee and Ashley Evans-Smith, and Evans-Smith is a strong wrestler, and as we saw last week, Andrea Lee is also very nasty on the ground. So, with a fight like this, you know, Gillian Robertson is only, you know, 23 years old, so is Macedo. At the moment, Macedo's training at the MMA Factory in Paris, which is the gym that Francis Ngannou is from. And Gillian Robertson trains at American Top Team. So, you know, I'd be expecting these girls to make significant improvements from fight to fight. But at the current odds of around 2.40, I really think that there's good value on Macedo here, guys, because if she can keep this fight standing, which I believe there's a good chance she can, she should be able to absolutely dominate the striking exchanges. I don't see it being close at all. I don't see Robertson being able to make this fight competitive if it stays standing. And on the ground, I think Macedo can more than hold her own. I would say that if I was capping this fight, I would say that standing up, Macedo has a massive advantage over Robertson. On the ground, Robertson has a slight advantage over Macedo. But, you know, all fights start standing. Macedo is very good at creating scrambles to get back to her feet. She's also tricky on the ground. She's got some crafty submissions. So this could end up being a close fight. You know, Robertson could end up taking her down and getting a quick submission. But what I would say is that Macedo has fought at a high pace for 3 rounds, and her cardio has looked pretty good against much larger opponents. If we take a look at Robertson's record, the vast majority of Robertson's fights have ended very quickly. And what I noticed in her fight against Mayra Bueno Silva and against Molly McCann is that she was committing very, very hard to takedowns. And when her opponent was shutting those takedowns down, we started to see her take some really deep breaths, which is an indication that if she cannot get a fight to the ground early, she may struggle in the second and going into the 3rd round. Whereas we know Veronica Macedo is a cardio machine. If you go back and watch her fight against Andrea Lee or Ashley Evans-Smith, you'll see that she can fight at a relentless pace for 3 rounds, absolutely no problem. So I do think there's value on Macedo this weekend, guys. Obviously, you know, it's not a rock solid bet because Robertson is very aggressive in getting fights to the ground and she's decent on the ground, but I just think Macedo's a more complete mixed martial artist, the better overall fighter, and I don't believe she should be the underdog, to be honest with you. So an implied probability of 42%, I think there's a decent amount of value there. So now we move on to the next fight, which is a fight that can be blamed for this video coming out late, because I was about to record this video this morning when the weigh-in started, and I saw that Diego Ferreira actually missed weight and did not look good at all on the scales, which changes everything. So I'll play that video for you now. You can see him here. In fact, this was released. Got on this video quite quickly when it didn't have time to process into 1080p HD. So hopefully, now that I've had this video open for a while, we can watch it in HD. No, we can't. We're going to have to struggle with 360p, but you know where to find this video online to check it out yourself, guys. But yeah, here is Carlos Diego Ferreira, not looking good at all. You know, you can see his face is quite sucked in and drawn out, seems to be lacking energy. Just does not look comfortable on the scale there. Obviously he's using the towel to weigh in, and weighing in at 157 pounds means that he was 1 pound over the lightweight limit, and I'm not sure what these gestures mean. Maybe he was surprised he missed weight. Maybe he's signaling to his corner that, you know, he missed weight, it didn't go good. But as you can see there, guys, Carlos Diego Ferreira not looking good at all on the scales, and he missed weight. Now there is obviously that stat flying around from 2018 and into 2019 that the majority of fighters that miss weight end up going on to win, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. If you go further back in history, all the way back to the data that is studied in the Fightnomics book, you'll see that the vast majority of the time, if a fighter misses weight, they do go on to lose. So I think there are two different types of missing weight. I think if a fighter misses weight by a significant amount, you know, like by 4 or 5 pounds, it means that they probably didn't try that hard to make weight, and they possibly abandoned the weight cut a long time before the weight cutting deadline, which means they had longer to recover than their opponent, who may have pushed their body really hard to make weight. So if a fighter misses weight by, you know, 4 or 5 pounds, I do think that gives them an advantage, definitely. And I think that's where, you know, the stat that's been floating around from 2018 onwards, where the majority of fighters miss weight, go on to win. I think that's because in a short, concentrated period of time, the fighters that were missing weight by a lot. So obviously that would give them advantage, because their bodies weren't as depleted as if they tried to kill themselves to make weight, like possibly their opponent did. However, the other kind of missing weight is where an opponent gets where a fighter gets very close to making the weight limit, like Carlos Diego Ferreira here. He was 1 pound over. His face was very sucked in, drawn out. He looked dehydrated, didn't look healthy. I believe that is the kind of weight cut that can have a significant negative effect on a fighter's performance, and those are the situations where a fighter that missed weight is more likely to lose, in my opinion. So I was planning to come here this morning and say to you that I believed Carlos Diego Ferreira was a good bet to beat Rustam Khabilov, but obviously we need to slightly rethink things because of how bad he just looked at the weigh-ins, which took place, you know, couple of hours ago now. But I will tell you how I see this fight playing out, irrespective of the weight, and then, you know, we need to factor in the bad weight cut to decide whether this fight is worth betting on. So what I would say about Rustam Khabilov is that he is an absolute decision machine. If we take a look at his record here, we can see that his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fights have gone the distance. And the problem with Rustam Khabilov is he has a very passive fighting style where he struggles to put his stamp on rounds. So the majority of his fights do wind up being close. You know, he only just managed to squeeze past Kajan Johnson in his last fight with a split decision win. If we take a look, sorry guys, I didn't actually get it up. I should have. But if we go to MMA decisions here, hard to type with a microphone in the way of the keyboard. But if we bring up Khabilov's name here on MMA decisions and we take a look at this fight as well, so sorry, it went to the wrong part there. This is what we need. So yeah, if we look at his last few wins, he just squeezed past Kajan Johnson with a split decision win. Unanimous decision against Desmond Green, but as you look from the media scores on this fight, many people scored the fight for Green over Khabilov. And he's been involved in a lot of other close fights as well. Lost a split decision against Adriano Martins. So Khabilov is one of those really frustrating guys that has got all the skills and ability in the world. He's got gravity-defying takedown defense, very technical striking, amazing wrestling. He's very technical on the ground. But for whatever reason, it's almost like there's a mental block that will not let him just let go and perform to his full potential. Now, it does look impressive that he's coming in this fight with a six fight winning streak, but at the same time, like I say, he could easily be coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak if we had slightly different judges. And he didn't look that impressive against Cajun Johnson or Desmond Green. Like I say, he's got a passive fighting style, and he basically just relies on trying to steal rounds with takedowns and a little bit of top control. So he'll keep the stand-up exchanges relatively close, won't really let his hands go, just keep them just competitive enough so that his opponent doesn't start to pull away from him or start to inflict damage on him. And then he'll look to steal 2 out of the 3 rounds with a late takedown and some grappling control. But sometimes that works against him because his opponent will either shut down that takedown and reverse position, or they will shut the takedown and finish the round strong with some nice power shots, something like that. So Khabilov's style is one that I would never really want to bet on against anyone semi-decent, because you just cannot trust him to perform to his full potential. You know, in the fights against Cajun Johnson and Desmond Green, it was clear that he was a better striker than both those guys. It was clear that he was a stronger grappler than both those guys. But for whatever reason, he just won't go up a gear. He won't go up by that 20% that he needs to put his stamp on the rounds and stamp on the fight, which is really, really frustrating to watch. And when a guy, you know, is competing against someone as dangerous as Carlos Diego Ferreira, it can get them into a lot of trouble. So with Carlos Diego Ferreira, what's interesting about this matchup is that Khabilov relies on keeping fights close standing and then using his strong wrestling to steal rounds. But Carlos Diego Ferreira is an absolute nightmare on the ground. So Khabilov might not want this fight on the ground. And if we go by his past fights, Khabilov really struggles to make an impact with his striking. Really a passive striker, you know, really low output. So if this fight stays standing, what I would say is that Khabilov is significantly better when it comes to striking. He's way more technical than Ferreira. He's also he hits harder and he's much faster. One thing I've noticed about Diego Ferreira is his hand speed's quite slow and his striking defense isn't the best. So Khabilov does have an advantage standing when it comes to technique, but that might be negated by the fact that Diego Ferreira is more active, throws a higher volume of strikes per round. So even though Khabilov has got the technical advantage, Diego Ferreira may be able to outwork him with volume. And Ferreira is also much more aggressive, so he could do a much better job of putting his stamp on rounds if it stays standing. Now, on the ground is where it gets very interesting. This is classic Sambo versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But what I would say is, even though Khabilov might be a stronger wrestler, he might be able to get Diego Ferreira to the ground. Diego Ferreira will be more than happy to go to the ground because his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is super high level. And in the past, we have seen Khabilov get himself into a little bit of trouble on the ground. You know, we saw him in some really bad positions. I can't remember what fight it was now, but okay, I'll have to ignore what I just said, guys. But have seen Khabilov struggle against some guys on the ground. I can't remember who he was against, but Diego Ferreira is an absolute nightmare on the ground. Very high level, very skilled, and from a technical point of view, I would give Diego Ferreira the advantage on the ground. So from a betting point of view, I was planning on recommending Diego Ferreira as a bet, because if we look at the current odds, we can see that he's currently around about a 2.25 favourite, which would give him an implied probability of 44%. Now, you know, he's the underdog. He can outwork Khabilov standing, and it's possible if Khabilov does get this fight to the ground, he can also cause Khabilov big problems on the ground. So as an underdog, I thought he would be a decent bet. But then looking at how bad he looked at the weigh-ins, you know, it's probably not worth betting him now, to be honest with you guys. Like I say, he looked dehydrated, sucked in, didn't look healthy at all. So it's possible that he could be nursing an injury or something like that. Or if he's had a really bad weight cut, it might have a big impact on his performance tomorrow. So it's unfortunate. I'd probably recommend passing on Carlos Diego Ferreira now. The only thing that would change my mind is if people see how bad he looks on the scales, you know, and if a lot of money comes in on Khabilov today, because one thing I will say about Khabilov, a lot of people just cap these fights based on win-loss records. They just scan through Wikipedia. They don't really do that much research. They may see Khabilov coming in on a 6-fight winning streak against a guy that missed weight, you know, a tough Russian Dagestani fighter, and they might just bet Khabilov blind. So if a lot of money comes in on Khabilov in the next 24 hours and the odds significantly improve on Carlos Diego Ferreira, at that point he might be worth a small gamble. But looking at how bad he was at the weigh-ins at the current odds, I'd recommend passing. So that is that fight out the way, guys. Let's move on to the next one that I want to talk about, which is it is going to be Marcos Rogerio de Lima against Stefan Struve. Now, one thing that struck me about this fight when I first started researching it was just how bad Stefan Struve's takedown defense is. I mean, obviously it comes down to physics, let's be real. He is 7 foot tall, and if you've got a really long, tall, thin thing stuck in the mud, you know, if you're getting on the base, doesn't take much to knock it over. And you can see that in his past fights, his very recent fights against both Arlovski and Tybura. Extremely bad takedown defense, probably the worst takedown defense in the heavyweight division, and some of the worst takedown defense I've ever seen in the UFC. I mean, when his opponent shoots in on him, it's almost like when you see like nursing staff in a hospital laying an elderly person down on a bed. It's not like he gets taken down with an explosive takedown and dumped on his back. It's like he goes down in stages. It's like when his opponent shoots in on him, he just sits down. Extremely bad takedown defense, which means stylistically this is an easy fight for Marcos Rogerio de Lima. De Lima's got, you know, a nice single leg takedown, a very heavy top game, and he does a really good job of staying on top of his opponent from half guard and just chipping away with enough ground and pound to prevent referees from standing him up. Now, that's significant in this fight because Stefan Struve is a fighter that really lacks urgency. When he's put on his back, he goes straight to close guard, and he shows no urgency or no desire to improve his position and get back to his feet. He attacks with submissions off his back, and with his long limbs you would think that he would be quite dangerous off his back, but the problem with Struve is because of his size, he's so slow and the setups are so obvious that anyone with a half decent ground game can shut him down quite easily. Like I say, De Lima is reasonably skilled on the ground, very heavy from top position, a decent wrestler. Struve shouldn't be able to cause him too many problems on the ground, and the fact that Struve is so happy to accept bottom position and go to close guard means that De Lima could easily pick up rounds just with a simple single leg takedown, you know, early to midway through a round, and then cruise out the rest of the round from top position. So yes, De Lima does have a very easy path to victory, but one thing that I do want to show you is from the media day. I mean, size matters. There are weight classes for a reason, and look at the size difference between these two. They look about 5 weight classes apart. That is ridiculous. De Lima looks like a teenage boy stood next to an adult in this video. Absolute madness. And that is definitely something to think about in this fight, guys. While I'm talking about it, let's just go back and replay that while I'm talking about this fight, because the size difference is just insane. Absolutely insane. And obviously with the size difference that big, the longer it stays standing, you would think that the more it benefits Struve, because even though Struve isn't particularly great at fighting long, I mean, that size difference is going to make it very, very difficult for De Lima to get into range to land anything significant. He has to cover so much distance to land a significant punch, and there's no way he's going to be landing head kicks or anything like that on Struve. It's impossible unless he's coming in with some crazy Tekken 7 capoeira style striking, which I seriously doubt he is. So the size difference is insane in this fight. What I would say is that De Lima's got very, very heavy leg kicks, but at the same time, he does tend to throw them off balance a lot, which leaves him wide open to big counters. No one's really been able to punish him for that yet in the UFC, but Struve, big guy, should be able to see those kicks coming from a mile away. And at the Media Day Fight Week interviews just a few days ago, Struve did actually say that he had done his homework on De Lima, and the leg kicks were one of the things that he is prepared for, and he has a game plan to counteract them. So that's worth watching out for. Maybe he's been working on some counters to those nasty leg kicks. So yes, if this fight stays standing, given the size advantage, you have to give Struve a big advantage. What I'd say about Struve is he is quite passive. He doesn't really have that much urgency, but he does fight in bursts. So there were bursts of aggression in his matchup against Arlovski, burst of aggression against Tybura, and he did start quite strong against Volkov. You know, he's very inconsistent, but he's dangerous, and when you have a size difference that big, you know, your kicks are always going to be able to do damage to your opponent and potentially knock them out. So that is something to think about. The size difference could be a massive factor in this fight if De Lima isn't able to get this fight to the ground. So what I would say about this fight is, this is one of those weird matchups where De Lima easily has a path to victory. If we look at his current odds, call it an average of around about 1.87, which gives him an implied probability of 53%. So the problem I have with De Lima, if we go back and look at his record, is if you put De Lima in a bad position, he will quit. And I hate to bet on guys like that. You know, he basically quit against Ovin St. Preux, started strong, and as soon as Ovin St. Preux started to have some success, he looked for a way out. Same story against Antigulov, and same story against Krylov. A guy like De Lima is very good at being the hammer, but not so good at being the nail. And if you go back and watch any of De Lima's fights, particularly his losses, as soon as he faces adversity, you can see it in the eyes. Go back and watch his fight against Antigulov. When De Lima starts to face adversity, all the confidence leaves his eyes, all the energy leaves his eyes, and you can start to see him look for a way out. And as soon as his opponent puts him in a bad position, he'll quit. He'll either turtle up and allow his opponent to finish him with ground and pound, or he'll give up a weak submission. So I just cannot bet on a guy like that, guys. And with Struve currently being around about even money at 2.0, you know, this is basically a 50-50 fight. And I think those odds are dead accurate because on one hand, De Lima stylistically can win this fight easily. All he's got to do is look for a takedown in the first couple of minutes of each round and cruise out the fight from top position in half guard. Struve isn't really that dangerous off his back, shows no urgency to get back up off his feet. So De Lima should be able to dominate the fight from top position. But at the same time, you know, if Struve's able to hurt De Lima with a big shot, if De Lima gets cut bad, if he gets caught on the bottom in a reversal or a scramble, and Struve manages to rain down some ground and pound, it will not take much for De Lima to throw the towel in and quit mentally. So that's just not the type of fighter that I like to bet on. I think the odds are dead accurate on this fight, 50-50, and I just don't think it's worth risking good money on a fight like this. Why would you bet on a guy like De Lima who likes to quit, or a guy like Struve who has so many holes in his game and lacks urgency, when you can go and bet a young, hungry, up-and-coming fighter like Veronica Macedo that has got cardio for days, very, very tough, and very skilled in all areas? That's the way I would look at it. No need to put good money in harm's way. So that is that fight out the way, guys, and we now move on to the final fight in today's video, which is going to be Mikhail Oleksiejczuk against Jan Villante. Now, before I talk about into how these guys match up stylistically, I want to talk about some X factors which could have an impact on how this fight plays out. So the first thing that I want to talk about is how this is going to be Oleksiejczuk's first fight back after a 12-month-long suspension from USADA for being caught with clomiphene in his system. So clomiphene is the same substance that John Jones has been caught for, that Brock Lesnar was caught for, and I've done a little bit of research on it, and clomiphene is an estrogen blocker. So fighters tend to take clomiphene after doing a steroid cycle, because it stops some of the nasty side effects that you can get after stopping using steroids. There's a really good article here about it where they talk about John Jones's case, but it basically explains what clomiphene is, what it's used for, and why a fighter would need to use it after taking a steroid cycle. Basically, after a steroid cycle, your hormone levels can be really screwed up. You can start to grow man boobs, and your testosterone levels can lower, that kind of thing. So clomiphene helps prevent some of those nasty side effects, and also does boost your testosterone levels a little bit. So this is Oleksiejczuk's first fight back after taking clomiphene, which I guess suggests that he has built a career up until this point using steroids. So that's something to think about. You know, when fighters get caught using performance enhancing drugs and they come back, quite often their cardio is affected, quite often their durability is affected, and quite often their confidence takes a big knock, which means, you know, they're less aggressive and they need to find themselves again. And quite often we see a completely different version of a fighter when they come back from being popped from a PED, particularly one like clomiphene, which indicates you know, a substance a little bit more serious has been used, like a steroid. But having said that, Gian Villante is not without his own issues. So Villante is clean. However, he does have some health issues. Now, it's a pretty well-known fact by this point in time that Gian Villante's got poor cardio, and it's recently come out, you know, over the last sort of 12 months, some of the reasons for that issue. You know, if a fighter, you know, trains at a really top gym with guys like Chris Weidman, you know, why do they keep consistently coming in with bad cardio? You know, Villante looks like a guy in decent shape. Surely you'd think that would be something they could fix. But unfortunately, it turned out that Gian Villante actually suffers from asthma. So that is one of the causes for his poor cardio. And also, in this article here, before one of his fights where he gassed out, it said that they basically found fluid around his heart, which obviously could also have affected, you know, his cardiovascular system and his cardio basically. So I'm not sure if that's more of a chronic long-term issue or a short-term illness, but it's clear that there are reasons why Villante's got bad cardio, and they're probably issues that can't be fixed, at least not anytime soon. So both guys coming into this fight with a little bit of baggage, shall we say. So now let's move on and discuss how these guys match up stylistically. So I just want to show you this fight here, one of Oleksiejczuk's recent fights. And when I say recent, I mean he's only had 2 fights since this matchup, but it did take place back in 2017. It was against Charles Andrade, and I just want to show you a huge hole in his game. So if we hit play here, this is the start of the fight, and what you can see is that Mikhail Oleksiejczuk has very, very bad striking defense. You know, literally as soon as the fight starts, you will start to see him getting caught with some big shots, you know, getting caught cold by his opponent. You know, his opponent's not exactly great. He's got a record of 31 and 33. And yet Oleksiejczuk, again, eating clean, hard shots, very poor striking defense, looks very, very vulnerable when exchanging. Again, not comfortable in these exchanges at all. His opponent pulls guard there, but then when they're back up to their feet, a little bit later on in the fight, I can show you again here, signs that Oleksiejczuk, very, very bad striking defense, and a low-level striker is coming up here. See, again, gets caught with some big shots there. You know, one thing I've noticed about Oleksiejczuk, he just wings shots when he's off balance. You know, look at the positions he's putting himself in. He's swinging, he's overcommitting, he's getting caught off balance. Against a more technical striker with more power in his hands, he would get knocked out. Absolutely no doubt about it. He's very reckless, bad striking defense, sloppy technique. I mean, look at that. When he's exchanging here, it's coming up here, he's just got his chin up high and exposed, caught off balance. Here it comes. You know, his opponent lands a right hook, and you can't afford to do that against someone like Gian Villante that hits so hard. You know, Villante does carry fight-ending power late into a fight. Very, very dangerous. Knockout power in every punch. You know, if Oleksiejczuk comes in with bad striking defense like that, there's a legitimate chance that he could get knocked out. Having said that, in his last fight against Khalil Roundtree, he did look a lot better, but still, you know, based on his performance against Charles Andrade, he is a knockout waiting to happen. So, what I would say about this fight is, we don't know what version of Oleksiejczuk we're going to get, because obviously now that he's been popped by USADA for taking clomiphene, he could show up and look absolutely terrible. But if we just base capping of this fight on his last performance against Roundtree, I do think he wins. Because against Roundtree, you know, Roundtree's very heavy-handed as well, much faster than Villante, very technical. Oleksiejczuk, like a lot of Polish fighters, showed off amazing chin, amazing toughness, a lot of heart and good cardio. And he weathered the early storm and then took over later on in the fight and won this. He was changed to a no contest, so obviously he failed his drugs test. So, at the current odds, Oleksiejczuk currently around about 1.50, giving him an implied probability of around about 67%. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out that he's unbettable in this fight when you take into consideration the fact that he may turn up and look like an absolute bum since he's been, you know, caught using clomiphene. At the same time, looking at how bad his striking defense was in his fight against Charles Andrade, again, there's just no way you can bet this guy at these odds. Absolutely no way. So does that mean that there's value on Villante? Let's take a look at his odds. So if we pop them into the implied probability calculator, call it an average of 2.65, giving him an implied probability of 38%. So with Villante, what I would say about Villante is, I believe that if Oleksiejczuk is able to make it out of the first round, he'll win, because I just think that Villante will be too tired to get a finish in the second and third round. We know Villante starts to gas out after about 3 or 4 minutes, and Oleksiejczuk fights at such a high pace, he's constantly in your face, will not give Villante any room to breathe. I think that there will be a big momentum swing in the second round, and Oleksiejczuk will take over and win the second and third round. So what I would say is, depending on your risk tolerance, I think there is a little bit of value on Villante. But again, it depends on your risk tolerance. Are you comfortable betting on a fighter who you know has asthma, who you know has potential heart issues, who you know will probably gas out after 1 round? You know, all things considered with Oleksiejczuk, his bad striking defense, his running with USADA for using clomiphene, there is a little bit of value on Villante. But at the same time, is it smart to bet on a fighter with those health issues that we know has bad cardio? I don't think it is. Personally, it's not. He's not a fighter I would bet on. But if you're looking for mathematical value, I would say Villante. You'll find it with Villante. Now, what I would recommend as an alternative, if you really want to bet this fight, and if this video gets 30 likes, and if the next video I do gets 30 likes, I'll be talking about these prop bets in more detail in Saturday's video. But I would, instead of betting Villante straight, I would look at the odds on Villante to win in round 1. So if you take a look at the odds here, Villante to win in round 1 is 10.5, which is very, very generous in my opinion, giving that outcome an implied probability rounded up to 10%. Now that is way more interesting to me because the return is obviously substantial. Now the way I look at this fight is, Villante is most dangerous in round 1. And as we saw in Oleksiejczuk's fight here against Charles Andrade, he's got very, very bad striking defense. So if Villante is going to win this fight, in my opinion, the most likely way he wins this fight is by knockout in round 1. He catches with Oleksiejczuk with something really big in round 1, where Villante's fresh, he's got loads of energy, big knockout power in his punches, and he can put Oleksiejczuk in round 1, put him away in round 1 and make him pay for his bad striking defense. Rather than bet on Villante straight, I think it is a much better bet to bet on Villante to win in round 1 at these odds, because the return is way better and Villante's output and cardio falls off a cliff in round 2. Now it's possible that Oleksiejczuk's cardio may be nowhere near as good as it was in the Roundtree fight because now he's been popped for a PED, so that might have affected his training. Maybe he can't train as hard, maybe being unable to use steroids to make him train as hard in camp will have a negative impact on his cardio. It's absolutely possible. But based on past performances, I don't see Villante being able to win a decision against someone as active and aggressive as Oleksiejczuk. So I believe the better bet is to take Villante in round 1. And even though this website doesn't have that bet, the bet that I'm about to talk about, some websites will let you bet on specific terms. So some betting websites, I know the Paddy Power offer it, they will let you bet on Villante to win in round 1 by knockout or TKO, which you'll probably get odds around 15.0 on that, which would take the implied probability down to just 7%, which I think is an even better bet, because there's not really much of a chance Villante gets a submission. If the fight did go to the ground, he would look to finish Oleksiejczuk with ground and pound. So that's something for you to think about, guys. I'm not saying I recommend that bet, because I do personally think Oleksiejczuk's going to win. All I'm saying is I think that Villante to win in round 1 is a better bet than Villante to win straight. So that is it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back with part 4 very, very, very soon. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. If this video gets 30 likes, and if part 4 of this video gets 30 likes, I'll be doing a bonus video on Saturday where I will be running through every single one of these matchups, looking at the prop bets and trying to find a cheeky little prop bet for every fight that will hopefully help you make some cash on Saturday. So thanks, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love, and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking.